A Royal Oak synagogue was vandalized with anti-Semitic hate speech and graffiti. It's the latest act of hatred toward the Jewish community in Metro Detroit. A swastika was drawn on the Woodward Avenue Shul in Royal Oak. The rabbi at the synagogue tells us he was informed about the hate symbol on Friday. Despite the vandalism, the rabbi says an act like this will not instill fear into the Jewish people.
And we will not allow this to define us. We will not allow this to instill fear in us. We will move on and continue doing all the goodness, kindness, bring all this positivity and morality into the world by being Jewish, by living Jewish, and by just practicing our religion as we know it to be right.
Now, this comes as the latest anti-Semitic incident to happen here in Metro Detroit. They're just some of the reported incidents that have happened over the fall and up to date here. In October, anti-Semitic flyers were found distributed across the city of Ann Arbor. The following month, multiple bomb threats were called into West Bloomfield's Frankel Jewish Academy. All students and faculty there were safe. In December, a man was arrested after shouting anti-Semitic statements to parents and children outside Temple Beth El in Bloomfield Hills. Then in February, a Texas man was arrested after threatening Jewish members of Michigan government, including Attorney General Dana Nessel. Then just last month, a Palestinian-American activist allegedly shared anti-Semitic messages during a diversity assembly at Bloomfield Hills High School. Joining me now are Rabbi Aaron Bergman of Eidat Shalom Synagogue and Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council, Rabbi Asher Lopatin. Thank you both so much for being here tonight. And we just ran through just a list of a handful of anti-Semitic incidents to happen here over, the last few months. I mean, it seems like a lot, or is this really par for the course? Let's start with you tonight, Aaron.
Well, par for the course is a lot. And, it's a small amount of what's been reported. There have been a lot, though, for many decades, and I think the Jewish community was concerned about reporting them. They weren't necessarily always taken seriously or said, well, it was just this, but it's not as bad as that. But I think some of these incidents, which were the domain of the fringes, have been much more tolerated by the mainstream. So that's why I think you're seeing them surfaced more, but I think the Jewish community is also saying we're going to report everything now. And we're not going to say that there's a tolerable amount of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, we're just seeing this over and over again. There seems like there's this rise here, or have you been seeing this as well?
Well, there is more of a fear, even though as a community, the Jewish community is not afraid, and we're going to move forward, as the rabbi said, of the Woodward Avenue Shul. But there is more of a fear, and our American Jewish Committee studies have shown that people are a little bit more afraid and self-conscious, Jews, of wearing symbols that outwardly identify them as Jews. So, and there's a tremendous frustration that why should there be so much hatred? The Jews are 2% of the population, and a child in a stroller, the child wasn't there, but to paint a swastika on a stroller, there just seems to be less shame. I mean, have you no shame to draw that on a child's stroller? And so I think that we're frustrated. The community is very frustrated, and luckily, I hope that the community in general, not just the Jewish community, but the broader community, is also frustrated and is really starting to see that this hatred really can have no place, no tolerance, as Rabbi Bergman said.
The latest incident, as we discussed here, is the swastika found on a synagogue in Royal Oak on Friday. And when you see what's going on here, how do you talk about this with your congregation, with your community members when you see this? I mean, the amount of frustration just has to be at an all-time high.
They want to know, our community wants to know that we're standing up for them, and that all the communities are.
And how are you doing that?
So we are, as Rabbi Bergman mentioned, we're publicizing this. We're communicating with the FBI. We're communicating with the police. We're communicating with our own Federation security service and organization. And we're communicating with the African American community and the Muslim community, and we're having them in our coalitions speak out against this. So the Jewish community knows that we all have each other's back against this hatred.
Go ahead.
Sorry. But I would just say that every day we open the synagogue is is a statement in and of itself. So even if we're not always necessarily talking about anti-Semitism, every day that we live our lives, every day that we're open, every day that the schools are open and teaching kids, and that we're living freely as American citizens, which we're entitled to do, that means another day the bad guys don't really win. And that's to try to get across the idea that they might be using these symbols, and the fact they used the word Azov meant the person who did it did a little bit of research also on this issue.
What is that for people that don't know?
Well, it's a unit of the Ukrainian military, which is actually active now in Mariupol. They're considered to be heroic, but during the time of the Holocaust, it was a very, very right-wing, deadly group against Jewish people and a number of others. So there's the Azov Brigade, on the one hand, does many heroic things, but there's a history behind it as well. Ironically, in Hebrew, the word actually means get out, which I doubt the person knew that's what it means, but just that was part of the irony of the statement. But the most important thing I think we can do is to say we're still here.
When you open up your doors and you talk to your members of your congregation, are people scared? Do you find people scared? And you know, what do you say to people in your synagogue?
Well, I think people are more angry than scared now that after the Holocaust we're still dealing with this. After everything we've been through, that these tropes keep recurring. But we do talk about that we are protected by the government. The local law enforcement has been wonderful. We have Deborah Lipstadt, who's a national person looking out for anti-Semitism. So try to contextualize is like, yeah, there are some bad people out there, but America is still protecting us, and to not be afraid. I think they're afraid for their children. You know, I'm going to be 60 soon, so I've seen anti-Semitism before, and there was a lull for a while. I think for a lot of people in their teens, 20s, 30s, anti-Semitism was in the history book, and all of a sudden it's real. So trying to help people contextualize, saying we've actually been through worse, and we've gotten through it because we've gotten through it together. I think people are angry about the people doing it. I think people are also frustrated by the silence of others. You know, the silence of people who are just bystanders who say, well, it's not that bad, and, you know, stop complaining. Or I would say there's frustration, I know for me, of people who aren't Jewish trying to tell me what anti-Semitism is.
Right.
I would never define hatred for someone else. You know, when someone says they were a victim of a hate crime, I'm not going to say, that wasn't really a hate crime, but people feel it's okay to define what anti-Semitism is, even if they're not part of the Jewish community. So I would say there's more frustration than there is fear.
You talk about, hey, you think it's in the history book, but the FBI and the Anti-Defamation League released reports a few months ago stating that anti-Semitism was on the rise and the highest we've seen since, I believe, 1979. What can be done about this? What are the actions that you can take to really end this?
Well, I think what needs to be done is something that wasn't done in the past, and that is other communities, minority communities or majority communities, speaking up and saying that we will not tolerate this, that we have the back of the Jewish community. And we're hearing some of that definitely in our coalitions, and that really means a lot to the Jewish community. So, and I think in the past, certainly in the Holocaust and leading up to it, there was no voice outside of the Jewish community defending the Jews and saying this is not acceptable. So that's what we should look for. As Rabbi Bergman said, the police, the FBI are great, but we need all the communities to speak up and say, you know, it's happening now for the Jews, and then when there's racism, it's happening in for the African American community. We're all going to speak out and not tolerate this and show how shameful it is and how cowardly this kind of hatred is. And I think with that, I think we will be victorious, and we will really, you're never going to end hatred, but yes, you can push it back to the sides, and you can make sure that the society is strong and tolerant and respectful for everyone.
Right, as all the incidents we talked about going into this segment about all the anti-Semitic issues that have happened here in Metro Detroit, it's not a Metro Detroit issue. It's an issue really around the world in this country. And so, Rabbi, final question for you here. And I know this is maybe a difficult question to ask, and the response could be difficult, but what would you say to somebody who is anti-Semitic, who goes out and commits a just heinous crime like this?
Well, at first I want to know, who are they? No one is awful in just one aspect of their lives. So whoever did the graffiti and whoever did these hateful speech, this person isn't great every other aspect of their lives. And they didn't come up with it on their own. I'd want to know where it came from and who they are. I mean, I would love to have the person on this show and just to say, okay, this is where I got the ideas from, this is who I am, this is where I come from. But I think we have to realize that anti-Semitism is one of the foundations of Western society. I mean, that's part of a larger issue, but the rejection of the Jews, the image of the wandering Jew, you know, the condemned to wander for all eternity, is a deep, deep part of Western culture. You know, there are movies, you know, in the 1930s even called The Wandering Jew, you know, the one who rejected the Savior and is condemned to roam the earth. And I think people are uncomfortable when Jews don't want to roam anymore.
What's interesting, you talk about the children, people in your congregation are worried about their children, and you relate it to children. You don't grow up just hating whether it's a black person, whether it's a Jewish person, or anybody. You don't just grow up, you learn it from somewhere.
Right, you hate Brussels sprouts when you're a kid. That you get on your own, but everything else, that's learned.
Right, right. Final thoughts from the rabbi.
This is something we can fight. So it might have been lurking for thousands of years. I think we're living in a community, and definitely in the Detroit community, which can stand up to anti-Semitism and hatred, and we can turn over a new leaf, and we can push this kind of hatred back, and it's for the benefit of not just the Jewish community, but of all of our communities.
Well, thank you both so much for being here
Thank
tonight.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
obviously
you for having us.
difficult having you under these circumstances, talking about this once again. It feels like Groundhog's Day as we continue to have this conversation. Thanks to Aaron Bergman, Rabbi Aaron Bergman of A. Shalom Synagogue and Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council, Rabbi Asher Lopatin. Thank you guys so much for your insight.
Thank you.